arts organization. They believe in the power of the arts to elevate voices and celebrate communities. Tonight's performers include Adam Booth, Noah Baum, and Ariana Ross. Please give a warm welcome to Three Voices, Ancestors, Perspectives.
Hello and welcome. I am so glad you all braved the snow to come out and join us this evening. I was like, no one's gonna come. My name is Ariana Ross and I am the CEO of Tapestries. And I am thrilled to welcome to the stage three different voices, three different perspectives from three different ancestors. Our first performer tonight is Adam Booth. He's ready to share her story. Are you all ready to listen? Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you for making the trip out. We've been here for a while, so I'm not sure what the weather is like. Has it turned a little worse over the last hour or so? Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming. West Virginia is not the first place that most people think of for Jewish stories. But there are Jews all around the world, and some of us live in West Virginia. Now, when I was growing up in West Virginia, my hometown is right on the Ohio River. And growing up there, anytime that we were celebrating one of the Jewish holidays, we always did it at my great-grandmother's house. So, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Purim, Passover, and my favorite, probably Hanukkah, was always there. And I think it was my favorite because, it was every child's favorite. You get presents. And it was easy to understand why we celebrated. Or so I thought. The celebrations were always at my great-grandmother's house, and she and my great-grandfather owned a furniture store. And so their home always, go back to 1990 when this story is taking place. Their home always was filled with the newest and most fancy furniture from 1970. Always like stepping into kind of like a game show prize scene. Their front door was a big white door, and it opened up like this, and it entered into a hall. And not a hallway, an actual hall, a room that connected other rooms. And it had all of the amenities of a real hall. There was a pedestal solely to hold a telephone, the only telephone in the whole house. There was a semicircular table with a lamp that was attached to a timer that would turn it on at 4:30 every night. There was a grandfather clock that I can never remember actually working, and a chandelier which for this holiday had a paper dreidel hanging from it. You look up like that and you couldn't help but see this enormous grand staircase that went up to the second floor, a place where no children were allowed ever. And all of it was covered in this smoky blue carpet, thick, and it just cascaded upwards, up those stairs, and it was covered in a thick plastic runner. And I made it my goal to get up to the second floor every single holiday. And the plan was pretty easy. I was a small kid, so I could very easily get up to the fourth step without getting noticed. I sat right there on the fourth step with my back right against the fifth step, facing that large white front door, waiting for it to open. And finally, it would creak open like this, and that late autumn cold air would blow in, and that paper dreidel would flip around like this, noon, hey, noon, hey, noon, hey, it would say. And the wind would blow around, and the cousins would come in, quick, close the door. They closed the door, and they all had their thick winter coats on already. And just to the other side of the front door, there was a coat tree that was no thicker than my wrist right here, with 4 thumbs that pointed out like this in different directions, and it was already burdened with coats. As the next family members came in, they'd take off their coats, and every contingent of cousins and aunts and uncles had their own method for how to put coats on this coat tree that was already out like this. Some of them said, symmetrically, coats at the same time, that will be okay. Others measured up mass and said, this one looks like it has the least on it. And they put their coat up there, and when the last coat was placed, they'd step back carefully. And it still just right down to the ground. Bam! It would hit the floor like that. Coats would splay everywhere, and the cousins would say, this happens every single year. And someone hollered out, tradition! And as they gathered up the coats and put that coat tree right back up, as everybody was looking down that way, I just scooted upwards the tiniest bit and slid back on that fifth step, bringing my legs up to the fourth. A tiny, almost unnoticeable movement. Before long, the door opened again, and more cousins came in with another uncle, and as the tree fell over like that, and the coats went everywhere, I was up on the sixth step, halfway to the second floor. My plan was going perfectly until she came around the corner. My great-grandmother was coming around the corner. She had been back in the kitchen making matzo ball soup and latkes, but for some reason she left the corner, and she came around the corner slowly. My great-grandmother was old. I don't know how old, somewhere between 20 and 100. She came around the doorway like this, and she was tall and old, and her face rested in a scowl like this. It was like Frankenstein's monster coming around the corner. Except her arms had been put on backwards. They made perfect triangles that pointed behind her like this, wrists bolted into her hips, and she came around like this. And I knew that the bottom half of her body must be moving, but who could tell because her polyester pant legs were that wide. She just kind of around the corner. Yikes! I jumped up and was down off of those steps, down by the front door. She came down the hall, right past the bags of presents. She lifted up a surprisingly elegant hand and placed it on that finial at the end of the railing that led up the stairs, and she pivoted around and began ascending those stairs, left foot, slowly, right foot. Left foot, even slower, right foot. And I was now standing there looking at the steps, and she continued to go up, left foot, right. Left foot, right. And as her feet were right at eye level, I noticed that one of her heels was much taller than the other one. Left foot, right. And her hand glided on up that railing. She was gone. My great-grandmother had been born in Philadelphia. She was the child of immigrants, came to the United States. They were Jewish immigrants. They were Lithuanian Jewish immigrants, Orthodox Jews from Lithuania, landed in Philadelphia. She was the youngest of 3 siblings. And when she was just a child, her mother died, and her father remarried, and it was like a retelling of Cinderella. The stepmother was mean, made my great-grandmother do all the chores, tend to everything. She treated her so poorly. And before long, they were pregnant with another child. And her half-sister was treated much better than her as they grew up. And it was such a terrible situation, supposedly, that when she was a young teenager, she decided to run away from home. She left Philadelphia and made her way across the country to eastern Kentucky. I can only imagine what it must have been like for a child of immigrants, first generation, young Jewish woman, maybe hitchhiking across the country in the 1920s to central Appalachia. She ended up in East Kentucky because her older sister had already made the same trip. And before long, she met the man that would become her husband. He was also a child of immigrants who had also come from Lithuania, who were also Orthodox Jewish. They were a pair. They got married and they moved across the river to West Virginia, where they started a family. They started a furniture business, and several generations later, I was standing right there looking at the steps of her house, thinking of the stories I'd heard about her, when suddenly there was a creak on the steps, and I snapped out of my thoughts, and she was coming back down, and left foot right. And as I saw that thick heel right in front of my eyes, I just blurted out, "Mo," that's what we called my great-grandmother, "Mo, what happened to your leg?" She stopped right there. And her long legs folded up, and she sat down on that plastic runner and patted right next to her. I skipped around and went up the steps and sat there on the 6th step right next to her. "You want to know what happened to my leg?" It was a long time ago, and your great-grandfather and I, we used to take a drive every Sunday. We'd listen to music and talk and get away, just the two of us. One time we were out on this drive, and he was turning from a quiet rural road onto a very big, busy road, and as he turned, neither one of us saw the car that sped down the road and slammed into the side, the passenger side, right where I was sitting. Pow, like that. I was wrapped in the story. "Really?" I said. She said, "Yes, pow, right next to where I was sitting." I said, "Did you die?" Almost. I was in the hospital for some time, and when I finally got released, I hadn't died, but I got a piece of my leg, which is why I have to wear a shoe like this. She looked at me for a long time and then finally said, "Do you know why we celebrate Hanukkah?" I said, "Yeah, of course, potato latkes." I don't have time for the whole story, but it was a long time ago. And there was new rule in the land. The Assyrians and the Greeks came into power over the Jewish people, and with that transition, they brought all of their rule. They wanted the Jews to live the way that they had lived. Can you imagine someone coming into power and trying to change the way that everyone else lived? Well, they wanted them to eat the foods that they ate, foods that were against our law, foods that were unclean. They wanted them to worship all of their gods. They had many gods, but the Jews, we just have one. Many names, but one God. And of course, they didn't want that, so they started to fight back. And as they started this resistance, well, would you believe? Nobody could. The leader of the resistance was an old man. As old as you? Older. And they fought back, and they fought, and the Jews were outnumbered. And soon this old man knew that the end of his days were coming, and so he gathered his sons together because they would be taking over, and they called them the Maccabees. It's not a real last name, it's an acronym. It stands for "Who is like you?" Because there is no one who can perform miracles like God can. And the Maccabees took over, and Judah Maccabee led them, and a miracle happened. Even though they were outnumbered, they started to win. They started to fight back even more, and you know what? They did win. It was a miracle. They took back the temple, and when they got into the temple, they went to light a menorah. It's like a candelabra, like a large candlestick, but they only had enough oil to light it for one night. But as a sign of the miracle, that oil burned for 8 nights. And that is why we celebrate Hanukkah. Who is like you? Do you understand? Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Okay, what? Can I go upstairs? No, she said, stand up, it's almost time to eat. And we stood up, and just then, not even moving from that step, the front door opened up like that. That cold wind blew around, the paper dreidel flipped back and forth like this. No. And more cousins came in, and they took off their coats and set them on that coat tree, and it was too much, and the coat tree fell over again. Bam, it hit the stairway railing, and bam, down onto the floor. Coats went all over the place. This happens every year, they said, as they bent down to pick it back up. My great-grandmother tapped me on the back and said, being Jewish is a lot like that coat tree. We have a purpose. We are chosen to do something here, but sometimes the weight gets too much. Sometimes we're overburdened. Sometimes there are outside forces, and we just fall over, and life just breaks apart. But there's always someone there to pick us back up. Who is like you? Do you understand? Go play. And I ran to play, and soon it was time for the meal, and the folding table stretched out from the front of the house all the way to the very back, and all the relatives sat together, and we ate our soup, and we had latkes with applesauce, homemade applesauce, and brisket, and we had chicken, and afterwards it was time for presents. We moved all the tables and chairs, and we had presents, and then it was time for dreidel, the spinning game. We spun the dreidel with the 4 faces, with the letters Hey, Gimel, Nun, Shin, that stand for a great miracle happened there. We'd spin and see which one landed face up, and we would give or we would take, and we'd pick it up and spin it again, and we would give or we would take. And after we spun the dreidel for a long time, the kids, we would all stand up and we would pretend to be the dreidel. We would spin around and around and around with our arms out like this, and the whole world just became a blur until we couldn't stand it anymore. We were too dizzy, and we fell right over, laughing and kicking our legs. Then we'd get back up and do it again, spin around and around, and the world just became a blur until we couldn't stand up anymore. We fell down and laughed, and we'd get back up and spin and fall back down and stand back up and spin and fall down and get up and fall down and get back up and fall down and get back up. And as we did, over in the corner, I could hear my great-grandmother say, I think they understand. Thank you. Thank you. We have some more stories for the evening, and our next storyteller is Ariana Ross.
When I was 7 years old, my grandmother had a habit. She would pinch my cheeks like they were made of rubber and pat my head like I was a dog. I would look at her and say, Grandma, what are you doing? Leave me alone. And then she'd lean back. Bubala. Bubala means little girl in Yiddish. Bubala, you know you're lucky. Your people, we speak 4 languages: Yiddish, Hebrew, Russian, and English. By the time you are 11 years old, you should be able to speak all 4 languages. Grandma, I can barely read and write English. How am I going to learn 3 more languages? I don't know, but you're smart. She would say that, and then she would lean back even more. I always wondered how far she could lean back. It seemed like the couch would envelop her like a great big hug. Bubala, did I ever tell you the story? Now, I probably had heard my grandmother's stories at least 100 times. I mean, at least, but it didn't matter. I could hear them over and over and over again. I don't know if you have a song or a story or a book or a movie that you like to watch. It's sensation that each time you watch it, it feels new. My grandmother, she would look at me and say, Bubala, did I ever tell you the time? Now, the story that I'm about to share with you all, the story of my great-grandma, Sarah Dach. My grandmother, probably by the time I was an adult, had told me that 1,000 times. And I remember the week she passed away, I was sitting next to her sister, my great-aunt. And my great-aunt looked at me and smiled. So, I hear you're a storyteller. Yeah, I'm a storyteller. Good. Tell me a story right now, just right now. Right now? I mean, we're in the middle of celebrating Grandma's life. Yep. Everybody quiet. Arianna is going to tell us a story. All of my relatives, all of my grandmother's friends grew silent. I started to tell the story that I'm about to tell you all when my great aunt interrupted. What's this? That's wrong, completely wrong. Your grandma, memory like Swiss cheese. Terrible memory. Your story lies. Sit down. So my great aunt started to tell the story I'm about to share with you all. But it was completely different than my grandmother's version. I mean, not even remotely the same. I don't know if you've ever played the game telephone. It was like that. By the time it got to each child, different story. So the story that I'm about to share with you all, the story of my great-great-grandma, Sarah Dach, it's as close to the truth as I can get, combining two of my ancestors' versions of the same story. But in order for me to be able to tell it to you, I need to step into the shoes of the storyteller herself. Hi, my name is Sarah Dach. When I was 7 years old, my mother told me that we had to move. I looked at her and said, no way, no how, I'm not going anywhere. I have lived in this Russian village my entire life. I'm not leaving. My mother, she looked at me. It's not possible for us to stay, Bubala. It's dangerous. In the village next to ours, there are houses being set on fire. Jews are dying. We have to go. She put this blanket on my floor, and I looked at it. What am I putting in there? Clothes, and only clothes. I looked around my room. I had 10,000 special items. Can I bring at least a couple? No. You can bring one. She left the room, and I started to pack. What was I going to bring? What do you bring if you could bring one item? An item that if you left behind, it would make your heart hurt. I walked outside. I know this might seem silly, but I grabbed a handful of dirt. I knew we were never going home again. I put that dirt in a small cloth, tied that cloth up, put it underneath my clothes. But I knew if my mama or papa found out I was bringing dirt, they would make me throw it out. So I also put my favorite stuffed animal, the doll my grandmother had made me. It was missing one arm and one leg was hanging by a thread. But I put that one on top, tied up my blanket, threw it over my shoulder, and turned to walk out of the house. My mama asked if I was going to wait for everybody else. I said, I guess so. We left in the middle of the night. We didn't bring any of our wagons, no lanterns at all. We just left. We didn't even say goodbye to anyone. My mama said it was better that no one knew we were leaving. I asked my papa why. We couldn't say goodbye to at least the rabbi. He said it's better they don't know. No knowledge is good knowledge right now. We walked. We walked for what seemed like forever, but it was 2 whole weeks. Some nights we slept in a barn, sometimes behind a rock. One time we slept in a ditch. The adults always had to stay awake, at least one adult every single night. And one night, my mama, she didn't mean to. It wasn't on purpose. But she fell asleep when it was her turn to watch. When we woke up, my brother, his stuff was gone. My little brother, he was livid. He was so angry. He looked at my mother, and in his tiny little 5-year-old voice, he said to her, you know what? I'm going to wear these clothes the rest of our trip. My mama looked at him and said, you're going to start to smell. I don't care. I can make you some clothes. Smell I will. When we finally stopped moving, I was so grateful. I was gonna get a bed, my own bed. I looked at the boat. I saw all the windows. I asked my mama where we were gonna sleep. And that's when she pointed to the bottom of the boat. The steering class, she said. We went down to the bottom of the boat and I looked around and there was bunk beds everywhere. And there was a man standing in the middle of the bunk beds. He did not look friendly. 2 beds per family. Excuse me, we have 3 tickets for 3 beds. 2 beds per family, or get off my boat. I had to share a bunk bed with my mama and my little brother. And my papa, he shared a bunk bed with my grandpa. It wasn't so bad. When the boat started to move, I realized that none of us had thought to bring anything to do, though. I mean, we sang songs, we played games, we laughed, fights broke out. My mama, she got a job. And with her job came a little bit of extra food, an apple, a piece of bread. She was required to bring water from the top deck to the people who had money. We didn't get that water, we got the food. It wasn't so bad, but a pattern developed. We would get up, we would eat, we would sleep, we would eat. I was bored. I was 7. I wanted to do something, so I waited until everyone was taking their afternoon nap. I pretended to snore. I snuck out of the bunk bed. My mama didn't even move. I opened the door between our section and the section who had money, and the man who normally guarded our section was asleep. I went right past him. I went to the middle area and I tried to look in the windows, but everybody was asleep. I went up to the top deck and I immediately walked the perimeter of the boat. I found the bow and I saw these bars, and I thought I could climb. I was an excellent climber. So I started to climb up and I got higher and higher until I was at this point where I was leaning over. And I looked up and I saw this rope. I really wasn't thinking. Most people recognize a rope on a boat and do not grab it. I was 7. I grabbed it. And the minute I did that, I knew it was the most foolish thing I had done in my entire life, because that rope started to swing over the ocean. I'm fairly certain that they could hear my scream back in Russia. I felt this arm reach up and grab me, and this man pull me down to the deck. I had no idea at first what he was saying to me. Then he quickly switched from English to Russian. He looked at me and he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. My name is Captain Sam. Who are you? Seradach? Seradach, you're in trouble. He grabbed my hand and he pulled me all the way down to the bottom of the boat. He made me point out my parents. I thought about pointing out someone else's parents, but I figured I'd get in trouble anyways. My mama, she was upset. She told me to sit on the bunk and contemplate the fact that I could have died. I sat there for almost 3 days, getting up to do what I had to do and then get back. At the end of the 3rd day, my papa sat next to me and he looked at me. Bubala, do you want to go to the top deck? Yes, you can't. Why did you ask me? Well, you can't go alone. Tomorrow, when it is our turn, we get in line. And when we are allowed up there, I will go with you. First thing you will do is apologize. I hated apologizing under the best circumstances, but I knew I had to. So, the next day we got in line. We went up to the top deck. We found the captain. He was steering the boat. It was a big ship, and he was steering it, and I looked at him and I apologized. And he did something I never expected, not in a million years. He put his hand over mine and he told me, "You, come. I need you to stay out of trouble. Every day for 30 minutes you will come see me. I will teach you." And he did. He taught me how to steer the boat. He taught me how to tie a knot. And he started to teach me English. I knew we were going to America and that I would need to speak English. I was excited. I wanted the English lessons more than I wanted anything else. Honestly, I didn't care about knots. He did. He showed me how to comport myself, and he explained what was going to happen when we reached Ellis Island. When the boat finally docked, I was nervous. What if I made a mistake? What if I said the wrong thing? What if? We had a phrase in my family: if the bublik hat gavetla trolley car. If the booby got on, if the grandma got on that trolley car, maybe it was the right one, but maybe she would get on this one and it would be the right one. Or maybe this one, or maybe that one, or maybe. I felt this tap on my shoulder. It was the captain. He reached up and he pulled his hat off his head and he put it on mine. I looked at him, confused. "Why are you giving me this?" "I can see you're nervous. I can't help you now. But any time you're nervous, remember me." I kept his hat on the whole day. It was a long day. We walked up a very big set of stairs. They examined us. I mean, when I say examined, it was like arms, length, fingers, toes, teeth, eyes. They shined flashlights. They checked your hair to make sure you didn't have any bugs. Every aspect of you was checked, even the parts you wish hadn't been checked. And when it was time for us to enter this hallway, I saw a door. I knew that was the moment I should take the cap off, and I put the cap away. I was ready. I was ready to speak for my family. I was the only one who spoke English. They spoke Yiddish, Hebrew, and Russian. I stepped in the room, and there was a man sitting at a desk. He didn't look very friendly. He didn't look very happy to be there. "Name?" "Oh, hi, my name is Sarah Dach. How are you?" "I am fine, thank you." "Name? I simply asked for your name, young lady. I don't need to know all the details. I don't wish to have a conversation with you. I wish for you to isolate your name. Do you know your name?" "Oh, Sarah Dach. We are the Dach family. This is..." I realized I never called my mama by her name. She was Mama. I never called my papa by his name. He was Papa. I never called my grandfather by his name. He was Zadie. And my little brother, well, he was Samuel the Annoying. I turned and I introduced each of my family members one by one. And the man just looked at me in confusion and irritation. I had no idea why I made him so angry. I was just introducing my family. "Difficult last name," he finally said. "New last name. You're entering the United States of America as Deitch. D-E-I-C-H. I turned around and I told my mama, "It's okay." She started to fuss with my clothes. "It's all right. In streets, in school, in life, we are Deitch. In heart, in home, we are Dach." He does not know what he is missing without the in his life. We left that space. I could tell you story after story of life in the US, but we'd be here through today into next week. But I did take that dirt and I planted it. And any time I missed home, I would touch it and remember. Remember the time I climbed the tallest tree in our village. I would remember the rabbi and my friends. I would remember the small village versus the big New York. That is the story of my great-great-grandma, Sarah Dach. Now, you may be wondering at this point, why is she playing this instrument? Well, to be honest, they couldn't bring a piano with them. Piano has been a part of my family's life for generation upon generation upon generation. My mom is a pianist, her mother played the piano, and so on and so forth. And so I do play the piano, but when I tell stories, I bring my thumb piano to remind me of the music that lived in my family's heart for generation after generation after generation. I will admit, we do not use the last name Dach anymore. If you ask most of my family, they would say Deitch, we're Deitch. Even my own last name, Ross, when we came across, it was Rosenblatt. And it became Ross because it was easier. Ross was simpler, and Ross would get us jobs. In the end, it didn't really matter whether we were Ross, Rosenblatt, Dach, or Deitch. It was difficult all around. But it was the music and the stories that lifted our hearts. So our next storyteller is an amazing storyteller, Noah Baum. I would like to introduce her. It's going to take us a moment to set the stage, but when we are ready, you will know.
Hello. Shabbat Shalom. It is the Sabbath tonight. I grew up in Israel, and I did not grow up praying. Praying was not part of my upbringing in Jerusalem. Yes, occasionally we lit the Sabbath candles, and my father would say the blessing over the wine and the bread. We had blessings as part of the Seder ritual and Passover, but that's just part of tradition. I never paid attention to the words. They didn't mean anything. I don't pray. I'm an Israeli, a secular Jew. Praying is for religious people, old people. They go to synagogue and mutter words from ancient books. But my grandmother, my Savta Mina, she was religious. And all through my childhood, from the age of 3 to the age of 17, I spent with my Savta Mina. I was with her every single holiday. I was with her every summer vacation. She lived in a small one-bedroom flat in Tel Aviv, where above the piano in the tiny bedroom, there was the picture of Yaakov, a young man with a hat of a religious man. Yaakov was her son. He was killed in the war of 1948, the War of our Independence, when he was 22 years old. Yaakov was her son and my mother's brother. When her brother died, my mother stopped being religious. But my Savta never talks about her son, Yaakov. And in the living room, there is a framed Gobelin embroidery of a meadow with little specks of red flowers. Judith embroidered that. Judith was her daughter, my mother's sister. She died when she was 23 years old. And we always knew that Judith died of a lung disease, but it was decades later, when I was in my late 40s, that I discovered that Judith, who was 15 when her brother was killed, never recovered from his death. And after 8 years of struggle with depression, at the age of 23, she took her own life. Is that why there's no pictures of Judith, the taboo of suicide? My grandmother never talks about those she lost. My Savta never cries. My Savta is always full of energy and life. When I'm with my Savta, it's always gegangen, let's go. We're always on the go. We go to the beach every day. We go to the market. We go to visit the cousins. And she buys me everything. See, I'm the favorite grandchild. She buys me freshly squeezed juice from street vendors, carrot juice and orange juice and pomegranate juice. She buys me puffed pastry filled with whipped cream, dresses, patent leather shoes, ribbons for my hair. And my Savta loves to joke. She grabs my butt and says, "Is this a große Tuchus? Is this a big butt?" "No! You have a große Tuchus." "Ach, nein, 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 Savta. Savta has a sehr große Tuchus. Savta has a very, very, very big butt." When I'm with my Savta, we laugh, we do things. But every Friday on the Sabbath, just like today, because she is religious, my Savta lights the Sabbath candles. And when I was a little girl, watching my Savta light those candles was a special, magical time. I especially love the time before the candles are lit, before the sunset. In my 8-year-old mind, it is the hour of the doves. It's that time, Friday afternoon, when all the buses stop running. And all of a sudden, everything stops. All the engine rumblings and the screeching brakes and the hustle and bustle of life, everything disappears and it becomes so quiet. A stillness like no other settles over the world. It becomes so quiet that suddenly you can hear the doves, the turtle doves. They're always invisible in the eaves beneath the roof. And I sit in the enclosed balcony on the folding aluminum lounge chair and listen, embraced by their soft cooing and gurgling, the mysterious wonder of their conversations. I'm cradled in peace. That is the hour of the doves. And slowly the light changes and the sun begins to set. And in the kitchen, I hear my Savta preparing the candles in the 3-branched silver candelabra on the kitchen table. So I come in to watch. "Savta, why are there 3 candles?" She shrugs. "Zu gedanken, to remember." And I watch as she covers her head with a sheer white scarf and she lights those candles in the dimming light of the day. And then she circles her hands around those flames like an ancient sorceress invoking the light to dispel the darkness. And she covers her face and she prays. She's pronouncing the Hebrew words in the way the old people do in the old country, S instead of T, which I always think is so funny because we don't speak Hebrew like that at all. And then her lips continue to move, but I can hardly make out the words. And suddenly it's not my Savta anymore, and it's a little scary. Her lips are moving, but she's far away, whispering on and on. Names, a long list of names, strange names. Hashik, Ruja, Idale. And hypnotized, I watch a trickle of tears inch its way through her fingers, along the grooves of wrinkles of her hand. And my throat tightens. I want to reach out and pull those hands away from her face, make that trickle stop, get my smiling, loving Safta back. But she's so far out of my reach, I dare not get close. Like something holy I know I'm not allowed to touch. I just stand there holding my breath. And finally, the list ends, always with the same words. Meine Judith, my Judith, and she sighs. Meine Yakovale, my Yakov, she sighs again. And then the hands come off the face. She wipes the tears. Her big smile is back. Lass dir sein Shalom. Let there be peace, a guten Shabbos, a good Sabbath. Umein, umein, umein. Amen. And she pulls me into her smothering embrace that smells of 4 7-Eleven cologne and fried onions and cheap lipstick. And her arms are the comfort and safety of the world. For years, I witnessed that sacred ritual over and over and over. When I was a teenager, I began to understand that those names she mutters are of all those she lost. Zu gedanken, to remember. Her mother and father, brothers and sisters, their husbands and wives and children, her cousins and aunts and uncles, all taken by the Nazis. In my 20s, I still came over to my Safta Mina almost every Friday afternoon, but I did not stay until the hour of the doves. I was busy, gegangen, on the go. I sit in the cafe with my friends, a sacred Friday afternoon ritual in Tel Aviv. Who has time for all this candle lighting and praying? It's for old people, for religious people. Who needs all that remembering anyway? The year I was married, my Safta turned 89 and started to forget. A year later, when I left for America with my new husband, she no longer recognized me, and 9 months later, when I was 8 months pregnant with my first baby, my Safta Mina died alone in a nursing home. And I was angry when she died. I was angry that she died. I was angry that she died alone, so far from me, not herself. Why did this happen? Why did she have to lose her mind like that? I did not want to think about my broken heart. I didn't grieve. I didn't cry. There's an ancient story from Syria about a drought. It is told that there was a terrible drought, and the people prayed for rain and they fasted, but rain didn't come. And one night the rabbi hears a voice in his dream, and the voice said, God will send rain only if Rahamim Chayat will pray for the people. And the rabbi wakes up confused. Rahamim Chayat? It's the silent man that sits in the corner at the back of the synagogue. He doesn't know how to read. How can he come and pray? But what choice does he have? The rabbi decides to listen to the voice in his dream, and he gathers the congregation once again to pray for rain. And everyone gathers at the synagogue, and all eyes are on the bima. That's the raised stage in the middle of the synagogue, right in front of Aron HaKodesh, the holy ark. It's the cabinet that holds the scrolls, the sacred Torah scrolls, the scriptures. And all eyes are on the bima, waiting for the rabbi to step up and lead them in prayer. But the rabbi is standing amongst them. And he stands up and he calls, Yalev, Yavo, come forth and pray in the name of the people, Rachamim ben David, Rachamim the son of David. Rachamim in the back of the synagogue looks up. His name to be called before the holy ark. With the heart pounding, he comes forward and he whispers in the rabbi's ear, "Rabbi, you know I don't know how to read. Please don't shame me." The rabbi says, "Rachamim, today you are shliach tzibur. You are the representative of the congregation. It is you who must pray for us." Mortified, Rachamim looks around. All eyes are on him. He quickly asks permission to go and get something that he needs to be able to pray, and he returns to the synagogue holding a clay jar that has 2 spouts in it. Still trembling, he steps up on the bima, facing the congregation, and he says, "I ask that you all pray with all your heart." And then he turns to face Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, and the whole congregation rises, as is the custom. And as is the custom, they chant the verses that are appropriate for this moment when the Holy Ark is opened and the Torah scrolls, the sacred scriptures are revealed. And now it is time for the leader to lead them in prayer, but Rachamim is not holding a prayer book, he's holding the clay jar. And he says, "Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, I don't know how to read. I'm a poor man. It is hard. Sometimes I cannot feed my children. When they are hungry, they cry and my heart breaks, and I cry too. I collect my tears in this jar. It is all I have. I asked my wife to bury me with this jar, but now, Ribono shel olam, I offer it to you. If this jar of tears is not enough, I'm willing to break it here before you." And at that moment, there was a flash of lightning and a crash of thunder, and rain began to fall. I didn't cry. I didn't cry for many years for my Saftamina who was gone. And then one day, it was a Friday afternoon, but I was far, far from the hour of the doves. I was in Davis, California. My daughter just turned 4. My son was 2. It was a quiet summer afternoon, and the sun was just beginning to set. And suddenly I heard the cooing of a dove. And I found myself taking 2 candles and putting them in the candlesticks that I got in a garage sale and lighting them. And I had no idea what the words of the prayer were, so I just circled my hands like she did. And then I covered my face. And suddenly I was there, standing at the kitchen table, watching my Saftamina bring in the light to dispel the darkness. And the tears trickled through my fingers. And I made up my own words. Brucha Shechina belibeinu, Brucha Shabbat beveiteinu, Shabbat Shalom. Blessed is the Shechina, the female spirit of God. Blessed is the Sabbath. Blessed is the Shechina in our hearts. Blessed is the Sabbath in our home. May it be a Sabbath of peace. And like my Safta used to kiss me after she put those hands away from her face, I grabbed my children and I kissed them. And you know, I've been doing it ever since. Today I know the words of the prayer and I chant them as is appropriate, but I always add the ones that I made up. And I feel close to my Saftamina when I pray. And sometimes I offer my tears. Shabbat Shalom. May it be a Sabbath of peace in your heart and in your home. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming out. This is the first time I'm performing in front of live humans in 2.5 years. I missed you so much. Thank you. I'd like to invite my wonderful storytellers here, Ariana Ross and Adam Booth from Story Tapestries. We thank you so much for coming, and we thank the Kennedy Center for having us.
And we'd like to take a moment to thank a couple people who made this happen. Jeanette McCune, who is a part of the education program at the Kennedy Center, for me is my mentor. And she's in the way back, but Suzanne Richard of Open Circle Theater is part of the Culture Caucus, who's right back there in red. She helped to connect to make this happen. So we want to thank her and the Board of Story Tapestries. And we'd like to take a bow and thank you all for coming.
And just to let you know that back there, Adam Booth has wonderful recordings, and I have recordings and books, and you can sign up for Story Tapestries and stay in touch and learn more about the sacred, wonderful work that Story Tapestries does. Thank you so much.
Thank you.